All right, let's jump right in. The period between 1450 and 1750, this was a time when the world wasn't just changing, it was being completely redrawn. We're talking about a global explosion of empire building, and believe me, this isn't just dusty old history. The aftershocks of these empires, they're still shaping everything around us today. Our borders, our cultures, even our conflicts.
And this isn't some abstract academic thing. Just look at how we talk about politics right now. Whenever commentators try to explain what's happening with Russia, what do? They immediately bring up the old Russian Empire. It's the go-to reference point, which tells you just how much the memory of these empires is still kicking.
And here's where it gets really interesting, kind of paradoxical actually. Back in the day, if you called a king an imperialist, that was a compliment. It meant he was a great leader, a builder. But today, it's one of the worst things you can call someone in politics. So how did we get this complete 180? Figuring that out is a huge part of what we're going to explore.
So that leads us right to the big questions we're tackling here. First, why did this global age of empire happen right then? What was in the water? And second, how did all of this forge the very world we're standing in today?
All right, let's start with our first case study, the European model. We're going to look at how a few countries on the edge of Western Europe pulled off something absolutely unprecedented, building massive empires an entire ocean away from home.
Yeah, this map really drives it home, doesn't it? Look at that. The Spanish, the Portuguese, the British, the French, they basically sliced up the Americas like a pie. And the craziest part is that they did it from thousands of miles away, across the huge, scary Atlantic.
So what on earth possessed them to do it? Well, this quote from a Spanish conquistador just says it all, doesn't it? We came here to serve God and the king and also to get rich. It was this powerful mix, this cocktail of motives, religious duty, national pride, and let's be honest, a good old-fashioned gold rush.
So the question is, how did a relatively small number of Europeans conquer these massive established empires? It wasn't just one thing. It was a combination of 5 key factors. They had geography on their side, they were fiercely motivated, they had better tech, ships, guns, you name it. They were also really smart about finding local allies who were unhappy with the ruling powers. But their single biggest advantage, the thing that was truly a game changer, it was something they didn't even know they had: germs.
And this right here, this is a perfect example of that allies' advantage in action. This is a woman named Doña Marina. She was a native woman who became the key advisor, interpreter, and strategist for the Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés. She was, quite literally, the bridge between these two colliding worlds. Seriously, without people like her, there's just no way the Spanish could have navigated the politics and pulled off the conquest.
Okay, so the European arrival in the Americas wasn't just about changing flags on a map. It set off 2 transformations that were so huge, so profound, that they changed life on every single continent, forever.
The first one is called the Great Dying. And just look at that number, 90%. Let that sink in. We're talking about an estimated 90% of the entire native population dying off. And it wasn't mostly from swords or guns, it was from invisible killers, diseases like smallpox and measles that the natives had zero immunity to. It's a demographic collapse that's hard to even wrap your head around.
And what's so incredibly powerful about this image is that it's not a European drawing of what happened. This was made by an Aztec artist. This is a first-hand testimony, a snapshot of the absolute horror as their society was literally disintegrating from this plague.
The second massive change is something we call the Columbian Exchange. You can think of it like this. For thousands of years, you had 2 separate biological worlds, the Americas, and then Europe, Africa, and Asia. This was the moment those 2 worlds slammed back together. It created this huge, chaotic exchange of, well, everything: plants, animals, germs, people, and ideas.
Just think about it for a second. There were no horses in the Americas before Columbus, no sugarcane. At the same time, there were no potatoes in Ireland, no tomatoes in Italy, no chili peppers in Thailand. Crops from the Americas, like corn and potatoes, caused a population explosion back in the Old World. It literally changed what everyone on the planet ate forever.
But listen, it's super important to remember that this whole empire story wasn't just about Europeans and ships. Not at all. At the exact same time, 2 other massive empires were being built in Asia, but they did it across land, and their model was totally different.
And this side-by-side just makes it perfectly clear. See on the left? That's the European way, a homeland here, and colonies way over there, across an ocean. Now look at the right.
That's Russia. It's one continuous block of land, just expanding outwards into neighboring territory. So what was driving Russia's expansion? Well, two big things. First, security. They were tired of getting raided from the south. And second, money. Specifically, the hunt for furs in Siberia, what they called soft gold. They made the conquered people pay a tribute, called a yasok, and then, over the centuries, huge numbers of Russian settlers moved in and basically absorbed the region. Now, China's Qing dynasty, they also expanded in a huge way, but their motivation was almost entirely about security. They were deeply worried about the Mongols making a comeback. And what's really fascinating is how they govern these new areas. They didn't try to force everyone to become Chinese. They used a much lighter touch, respecting local traditions, which was, pretty different from how the Europeans were doing things. Okay, so when these different empires took over, they didn't just put up new flags, they created brand new kinds of societies from scratch. If we zoom back in on the Americas, you can really see three totally different types of colonies taking shape. This table lays it out pretty clearly. You've got Spanish America, where the whole economy was built on silver mines and farming using forced native labor. This created a society with a lot of racial mixing, leading to a large mestizo population. Then you have the sugar colonies like Brazil. Their economy was one thing and one thing only, sugar, and that was run on the backs of millions of enslaved Africans. And finally, you have North America, which was really different. It was mostly small farms worked by European families, which led to a much more black and white, rigid racial system.
And these charts really show you what that looked like in terms of people. Just look at Brazil. By the early 1800s, half the population was of African descent. Half! Now compare that to Spanish America, where you see Native American and mixed race people making up the huge majority. I mean, we're talking about completely different worlds being created side by side.
And these pictures, they just perfectly capture the economic heart of these different worlds. On one side, you've got this huge, almost factory-like sugar plantation in the Caribbean, an engine that ran entirely on the brutal system of slavery. And on the other side, a quiet little family farm in North America. It's obvious that these two starting points were going to lead to vastly different places, right?
So what's the big takeaway here? It's that this age of empire did way more than just create colonies. It rewired the entire globe. It created a new global hierarchy, a system of power and wealth and inequality that in many ways we're still living inside of today.
I love this quote because it just hits the nail on the head. The British had an empire. Russia was an empire. See the difference? For Britain, the empire was something it owned, something separate. For Russia, the empire was the country. And that simple difference goes a long way to explaining why Russia held together as one giant state, while the European overseas empires eventually all crumbled.
And that leaves us with one last big thought to chew on. Okay, so the official empires of this era, they're gone. The flags have been lowered. But are they really gone? When you look at a world map today, when you think about why some countries are rich and others are poor, when you look at the mix of cultures in your own city, how much of that is a direct echo, a ghost, of this incredible world-shattering age of empire?